Okay, how is everybody doing? I hope it's a great night for everyone. Thank you so much for you folks showing up tonight. This session is in celebration of a new book, which is published already on Amazon. And I welcome everyone to check it out. It's called Understanding Gnosis. And the background of this book is that I wanted to I wanted to teach a course on Gnosticism, and hopefully I will be teaching a course on Gnosticism in the Religion for Breakfast new institute that's going to be coming up here in the fall. But as I was looking at the literature, I was dissatisfied with a lot of the introductions to Gnosis and Gnosticism. And of course, as everyone knows, there's a lot of dispute about those terms. Ultimately, I come down on the side of I'm happy to use Gnosticism as a placeholder term. And I'm very glad, though, that scholars of the past have helped us refine what we mean by this term so that we're not just aping the heresiologists. And of course, it's the scholar's job to make sure that we're not just rehashing what the heresiologists say. And that's really part of the project of understanding Gnosis, to talk really more about Gnosis than Gnosticism. And I'm not sure if it's my complete innovation. It's something I've learned from other scholars like Wouter Hanegraaff and Jeff Kripal, that Gnosis is not just a special insight that brings salvation. It's a higher mode of knowing. And so in this session, I want to introduce the book. And I also want to, hopefully, if we meet our goals tonight, I want to give away a copy of this book and a free e-copy to someone who, to a lucky guest here who gets the number right in the raffle. More on that very soon. Anyway, I just want to welcome everyone here tonight. Thank you again for coming. Let me run through this very quickly. If you haven't gotten the book, please think about it. If you go on Amazon, basically you'll find this description that Gnosis is not based on a doctrine or a myth or a feeling, but on an experience, a true vision. It's not just knowing or insight, but a mode of knowing. And it works at least to produce a higher mode of knowing, and one higher than normal human cognition. Gnosis was perceived to be supra-rational, that is above reason, and supra-empirical, that is not using the normal five senses or somehow transcending them. Accordingly, Gnosis grants access to a higher or spiritual level of reality. It is the perception of reality as such, or reality coming alive in us, transcending our normal means of perception. And actually, I was just listening to Justin Sledge on Kant this week, and I think it's a great video. Go watch that video. He shows how even with Kant, this experience of superhuman knowing is not completely ruled out. So after the defining Gnosis versus Gnosticism in the intro, this book presents 7 key features of ancient Gnosis based on my reading of Nag Hammadi and related literature. And that's a reading that has been ongoing for me for the better part of really 20 years now. The divine spark deferring the demiurge. So the main chapters are the divine spark deferring the demiurge, God is human, the specter of syncretism, Gnostic politics, Gnostic morality, and the maintenance of secrecy, or open secrecy, as I like to call it. And then the conclusion sums up the 14 principles of ancient Gnostic spirituality, which can be applied today. These 14 principles are also my last video on the channel. So if you liked that video, please go get the book. You can get virtually the same words by getting the book. Please don't download the script from YouTube. It will doubtlessly butcher it. And then at the end of each chapter, the study questions appear. So these study questions are designed for classroom use, but of course you can ask yourself these questions and hopefully get a lot out of it. So just to give you the table of contents. So in the intro, I define what is Gnosis and who has it. In chapter 1, we talk about the divine spark, which I've also talked about in this channel. Chapter 2, we talk about deferring the demiurge, that is, viewing the creator as somehow lower or lower down the scale than the true God. There's always a God above God. That's the general sense of Gnosis. It's not necessarily that the creator must be evil. That's not necessary. There's many views of that, but there's this tendency to view the creator as something lower. In chapter 3, we've got what I call Gnostic humanism, that is viewing God as human with a capital H. I tell you what I mean. It's very important Gnostic teaching, not too emphasized today. In fact, not a lot of people know about that or they don't like to talk about that for whatever reason. Chapter 4, we have the specter of syncretism, that is why it does make sense to think of Gnostics as syncretic, not in a nasty sort of way, but in a way that they are more vigorously using our native and natural talents as humans. Our brains are natural blenders of things, and Gnostics make better use of that natural skill. Chapter 5, testing transgressivity, Gnostic politics. I talk about what it might mean to not be deviant in society, but to how do we respond to archons? And in general, is there a way to get beyond the archons? And what's the overall attitude of the Gnostic when living in a society, as many of you are, where you believe that the regime, the current political regime that you're under is, in fact, corrupt? What do you do in that situation? The Gnostics had the answer to that. I'll be saying more about that in this summer's conference, the Anakakon in Vancouver. Chapter 6, strutting like roosters, Gnostic morality. Although some would deny that Gnostics had any morality at all, in fact, they're pretty close to Platonists and Stoics in emphasizing the importance of morality, and morality is obviously not going to be the same thing as what Hegel and others called heteronomy, that is just blind obedience to a law. But they did have an inner law, so to speak, though they didn't like to use that language, a change of heart, a transformational ethics. And then finally, the idea of an open secret, that is the idea of Gnostic secrecy. Did Gnostics tell more secrets than other kinds of Christians or other kinds of religious people? Not really, but they did have an interesting relation to secrecy. And this gets into, mystery cults and so on and so forth. And then finally, we have the 14 principles of Gnostic spirituality, which I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed that video, please share it. I'd love for more people to really get into this book and to take advantage. So that's the basic spiel on the book. And again, I just want to thank everyone if you have gotten it. I've made a slight revision in the past couple of days, nothing fundamental, but I noticed that there was a couple kinks to work out in the book. So I did a recent revision and uploaded that. So I will go ahead, actually, let's see. let's see if I can do this. I'm going to pin to the chat the link um, to the book on Amazon. And as promised, I'm going to give to a lucky um, viewer here tonight a free e-copy of the book. And the way we're going to do that is a raffle system. So basically, the raffle is there's a number on the back of this card, and if you guess the number in the chat, so you choose a number between 1 and 100 in the chat, and the person who is closest will get a free e-copy of the book. Okay, so we already have some very eager people. 23 and 42. Thank you, gents. I forgot to say hello to everyone here. Let's see. Oh, yes, 42 has already been taken. It's a popular one. I didn't think that was a mystical number. I just want to welcome here Ronnie, Lily. We've got Jim here. Jim is in the house, fashionably late, not too late. I think everyone's late on YouTube, actually. Matthew, thank you so much. Matthew just signed up for the Gospel of Thomas course. By the way, this is the last week that you can show up, or you can sign up, I should say. That is, the registration is going to close at the end of this week. So if you want to learn more about the Gospel of Thomas, maybe you've never read it, totally fine. Maybe you've been reading it for years, totally fine. This is a new experience to have a kind of scholarly classroom kind of a take on it. I won't be, forcing you to translate Coptic or anything. It's meant for people who know nothing, but I will use my knowledge of Coptic and other scholarly knowledge to bring home to you what is the distinctive message of the Gospel of Thomas. Some have called it the fifth gospel. For a lot of people, it was, it's their only gospel, the only gospel that they can believe. It's the only gospel that makes some people still Christian, are able to hold on to Christianity. But regardless of how you use it, I hope that you'll all sign up. The more, the merrier. And Ronnie, thank you for getting the Kindle version. I appreciate that. Okay, so I will announce the winner at the end of our session tonight. So if you haven't put a number in the chat, go ahead and put a number in the chat just so that you have it, and then I'll announce the actual number when we get close to the end here. Pamela, thanks for reading the book. Really appreciate that. And all right. So I'll take any questions regardless, whether about the book or about anything else that you're going through in life or that you're thinking about. Feel free again to use the chat. Use super chat if you want, but happy to take regular chats. Doesn't matter to me. I really appreciate you guys being here and the support. A lot of you who have gotten the book already have already shown support, and I hope that you all can spread the news if you have enjoyed the book. And don't forget to write a review of it. The reviews, it's very annoying, but basically, as you can imagine, what happens with Amazon is if your book doesn't get reviews, they don't in any way promote your book. So you're just lost in the void. So if you did enjoy the book, or even if you didn't, write that review and let other people know about it. And then Amazon will do what it should already be doing, which is letting other people know about it. So I'm just going to go through a couple of questions here. I'm going to run the session for another half hour. So make sure that you get your question in. Um, so Ronnie, are any of the red letter words of Jesus in the four Gospels scholarly questionable as not being authentic? Um, yeah, I don't think personally. I don't think any of those red letter editions are very helpful, because the red letter kind of makes you think like, oh my God, this is like a tape recording of the real Jesus. That's not how any of the Gospels were constructed. Obviously, no one had the technology to do a tape recording, and any kind of theory about like photogenic memory um, through repetition, you know, that just doesn't work. And the reason why that doesn't work is because there's no evidence of people sitting down trying to memorize Jesus's sayings. It does seem that Jesus's sayings, a lot of them are invented. And if you know anything about the Jesus Seminar in the late 80s, early 90s, they had a whole team of scholars who voted on which sayings of Jesus were genuine. And of course, they didn't limit themselves to the canonical gospels. They used also sayings from what are called the agrapha, that is basically non-canonical sayings. So they judged sayings in Thomas as well. And I believe their results are, publicly available. And, so if you're doing research, you can check out the results of the Jesus Seminar. There are endless books about what did Jesus say. I think in the end, there's good, healthy skepticism that anything that's recorded is not really what Jesus said. I don't take any of the words of Jesus in the Gospels as what Jesus said. I don't even take the words in the Gospel of Thomas as what Jesus said. They are all what the church or later Christians said that Jesus said. And that's a very important thing, that's a very important difference. Of course, they want to, on some level, be reliable, but no gospel writer is a historian. They weren't writing, to be a good like journalist or historian. They weren't like checking diary entries and interviewing apostles and so on and so forth. Uh, because by the time that the Gospels are written, the apostles had died. Um, and those people who say that there was a strong oral tradition that was consistent, the fact is, oral traditions, unless you're doing something like with Homeric poetry, they're not consistent at all. Um, as you can imagine, let's say that we're in a world before the printing press and we wanted to determine exactly what Martin Luther King Jr. said, and we assume that he never wrote anything. Of course, he did. So we have to assume a couple things that are not historical, but he never wrote anything and there's no printing press. So the only access to Martin Luther King's words are the memories of people. Martin Luther King Jr.'s words are the memories of people who were with him. And where are those people? Well, by 2025, I venture to say that most of those people have died. And so what would be the reliability of that oral tradition about what Martin Luther King Jr. said now more than a generation after his death? That's the kind of question you should be asking. Of course, since Martin Luther King is such an important figure for American history, of course, there's a lot of people who want to affirm very strongly that he said certain things, and they should. But those people are also, strong supporters of their own ideology, and for better or for worse, they have mixed in their own later thoughts and their own desires and their own needs into the remembered tradition so that the memory has been changed over time. And that's exactly how you should be thinking of the Gospels. Uh, I hope that thought experiment is useful. Again, it's not a perfect one, but um, okay. So, Matthew, how much synchronism is recognized by scholars between Christian Gnosticism, Hermetism, and esoteric Judaism? Well, scholars are a boring lot. At least New Testament scholars are a boring lot. They don't really know much about Gnosis. They don't really these days know much about Hermetic thought. A few of them, like April DeConnick, knows quite a lot about esoteric Judaism. So there are exceptions, but the reality is, you know, if you become a New Testament scholar today, you're never trained in like mystery cults. You're never trained in Hermetic thought. You're never trained in Gnostic thought. In fact, you're trained to distinguish the Christian ideas of the Gospels, Christian ideas of Jesus from Gnosis. And so that results in a state of non-recognition. And so that's why people like me and others are on YouTube, actually, because we do recognize that those things should be recognized, that those comparisons should be done. It wasn't always this way. I mean, in the early 20th century, you had a strong kind of desire, mostly in Germany, to relate Hermetic thought to Christian thought. And periodically you get some pretty nice comparisons. But overall, yeah, surprisingly, there's not a lot of interconversation between Gnostic and Nag Hammadi studies and New Testament studies. Why is that? Largely for theological reasons, that people who study the New Testament are also Christian believers and they work in seminaries. And so they have an ideology in which you need to keep the sayings of Jesus pure, even if it could be proved, and I think that it can be proved in some cases, that Jesus is speaking exactly like Hermes. You know, an evangelical New Testament scholar is not going to like that. A key example is the being born from above discourse, right? So in Corpus Hermeticum 13, we've got the discourse on rebirth, right? And Hermes is talking to a disciple and saying, you must be born again, and you must go on a heavenly journey, be born from above. And he explains how that dynamic works. And then in John, you know, we have a discourse which doesn't appear in any of the other Gospels, where Jesus is talking to his own disciple, in this case, sort of a secret disciple. And he's like, yeah, I've never said this before, but you must be born again, which means you must be born from above. And actually, very similar questions are asked. In the Hermetic Tractate, the disciple asks, how can one be born again from the mother's womb? And in John chapter 3, that's exactly what Nicodemus asked too. So is there some kind of relation? Well, I think especially there would be if we imagine John as actually being written in Alexandria. We have no way to prove that. But I think it's a reasonable hypothesis given the Philonic context, you know, with the Logos doctrine and so on and so forth. We could say much more about that, but I hope that you, Matthew, and all of you here today will think seriously about comparison and about the need and importance of breaking the spell of, shall we say, the curse that infects New Testament scholarship today, which is when you become a scholar in the New Testament, you just stay within the canon. That's the greatest curse. It's the closing of the mind, which is governed entirely by ecclesiastical and traditional concerns. All right. Appreciate that, Jared, for becoming a member. Members of this channel get access to videos that some of them are come from courses. Some of them you'll get early access. So take advantage of that. If you can't buy a course outright, you can become a member more, I think, much more reasonably. So who have we got here? Let's see. Einar, glad to have you. Are there examples of people actually having a Gnosis experience? Well, I think so. Don't you? There are people all the time who claim to have esoteric experiences. Some of them are inspired by things like psychedelics, but you don't need psychedelics to have a Gnostic experience, that is, to experience reality as such. That can happen to anybody, anytime, in any state. And many of you may have had that experience as well. Of course, maybe you haven't, and that's okay. But if you have, maybe you can share that in the chat. If you know anything about Jeff Kripal's books, he's a professor at Rice. Jeff Kripal's books are all essentially, you could just say that they are stories about people having these esoteric experiences. And then Jeff tries to explain how these stories might work. That is, how the real is talking to us and how we have these higher mode of knowing experiences that we can't ourselves explain, right? It's not that the Gnostic is saying like, oh, well, I always have access to a higher order of knowledge. I could just, wake up and have a higher order of knowledge. That's not really what's being said here. The knowledge hits you like a lightning bolt, often unexpected, by serendipity. And oftentimes it's painful and you don't want it because the knowledge and the experience emerges out of a trauma. And Jeff talks about this quite a bit. So obviously we don't want trauma in our lives, but the truth of the matter is people with deeply traumatic experiences also have these esoteric and Gnostic experiences. So there's something about deep human psychological suffering that is connected to Gnosis. All right. Well, I just want to thank, let's see, ATL for the super chat. Really appreciate that. So what are some good books and scholars to learn more about the Alexandrian origin of John? Well, I've written about early Christianity in Alexandria. So that came out with Cambridge last year. I don't talk a lot about John in that book, but there's an article, let me see. Essentially, you can just kind of go on Google Scholar and see what you can find. But I will let you know that there's an article, I'll put it in the chat here, by Gunter. It's called The Alexandrian Gospel and Letters of John. That I think you can just download pretty easy. It was written a while ago, but you can also get a very good commentary on John. Of course, getting a commentary is like walking into a minefield because most commentaries are written by evangelicals and conservatives. But there are actual good scholarly commentaries on John. And you've got to look at them by the series. So if you're going to look at a commentary, pay attention to the series that it's in. If it's in some evangelical series, You don't need that. Look at the publisher. But I recommend commentaries like, I'll just put this in the chat. The Anchor Yale Bible is a good commentary series. Hermeneia is a good commentary series. And if a scholar is, doing what a scholar should be doing, they should be giving you the list of options for the provenance of John, that is where John is coming from. But I would also, again, just recommend hopping on to Google Scholar, because that will also give you, some free stuff. So if you just punch in Gospel of John, Alexandria, it should give you a bunch of stuff where you can pretty much very quickly find the reference and download the PDF. So don't hesitate with that. Occasionally you will find, some crap out there. My advice in finding stuff online is try not to depend on like blog posts. Try to find actual academic articles that have passed peer review. Otherwise, you're going to kind of like get bogged down with a bunch of zany kind of theories that are the sort of pet theories of people who may or may not be qualified. Obviously, in this field, people don't have any time anymore. So if you're going to spend time on doing the research, then try to read that which has already been, through the gauntlet of the peer review. Obviously, if you can find a scholarly database, if you have access to a good library, you can get access to scholarly databases. I myself am trying to generate a scholarly database for people who are interested in Gnostic studies. That's called the Gnostic Archive. Basically, it's my service to the community, and I just want to let everyone know what's the best kind of scholarship in Gnostic studies. So if you want to get notified about articles and books coming out in the field, you can sign up for free. That's just mdavidlitwa.com. And I hope to see everyone there. But thank you again so much for your question. Okay, so let's see here. Greg Pierce, what's the symbolic significance of the dragon swelling its own tail? This is the Ouroboros, that is the tail biter or the tail devourer. It's a symbol of eternity. It often of a cyclic eternity, and it often is associated with magic and Gnosticism. I believe it originates in Egypt, and you'll see it often in manuscripts that have to do with spells. So I'm not actually sure when it got firmly associated with Gnosticism or Gnosis, but that's probably kind of a late phenomenon. Anyway, it's a cool image. Enjoy it. So let's see. AA, do you think that Jesus's cosmology draws its inspiration from Egyptian theology? The Heliopolis creation story. Well, I'm not sure that Jesus had a cosmology. At least we don't know about it. Certainly later Christians had a cosmology which they put in Jesus's mouth, and that could have been inspired by Egyptian theology, sure, especially if you were in Egypt. Remember, a very, very close city to Jerusalem is Alexandria. It's actually closer by boat than Antioch. And one of my points in early Christianity in Alexandria is the Orthodox variant of Christianity didn't want you to know much about Alexandrian Christianity, because to them it became an embarrassment. Alexandria became the city of heresy before heresy was even invented. Um, or I should say, it became known as a source of heresy when heresy was invented, which is, of course, much later. But for Jesus's cosmology, my goodness, you could pick up any Nag Hammadi text and, for instance, the Secret Book of John, and see Jesus's cosmology. And yes, I do think that there's influence from Egypt. I'm not sure if you could say, like, pin it down to a particular creation story. Um, but in terms of general similarities, like archetypal patterns, where you've got a mother, father, son, a kind of like a Trinitarian figure, as a trinity, like Isis, Osiris, Horus, that shows up as the mother, father, son pattern of the Godhead. But we need to do more work on that. So if you're interested, um, you know, we need your help. All right. So is there any advantage or difference of the live course on Thomas and the recorded courses? Well, sure. The recorded courses aren't on Thomas, but what is the advantage of doing a live course? That's actually a really important question. I think live instruction is the only way to go. Like, it's the only way to have actual full-on interaction with the teacher. A recording is great, but once the recording is done, it's done. You may be able to like ask a question through email, but you don't get the actual back and forth. When Plato theorized about education, he theorized a dialectic. That is, there has to be that back and forth aspect where your brain is shaped and reformed in that experience of interaction. So when you have a recording, that kind of freezes the interaction aspect, or makes it go very slow. Whereas the live course, you can actually be there in the moment, have an experience, an insight, and then tell everyone about it, and then have other people tell you their thoughts, which then shape your thoughts, and then you in turn respond. And it happens very quickly, and it's very meaningful, and it builds community. If you're just sitting alone in your basement in your underwear watching a recorded course, again, that's great, but then there's no one to talk to. So yes, I absolutely do believe that it's a much richer and deep experience taking a live course. I think hands down. Yeah, I think COVID taught us that too, the best education is live education. Let's see. So where are we here? Has everyone put in a number? Everyone should put in a number to be part of the raffle. Okay. Again, the winner of the raffle gets a free e-copy of Understanding Gnosis. So let me know what you think, especially for those of you who have read the book. Let me know what you think. Always happy to have that kind of interaction. So Blake Potato, you'd like to take the opportunity to thank for Hermetica 1. Yep, excellent. Yeah, Hermetica 1, there's been a big reaction to that. And I really, I'll take this opportunity to say thank you to all of you who have also purchased Hermetica 1 and have used it in your own spiritual life and have used it and read it as an initiatory text. It is an experience. And I hope that it's a meaningful one, and feel free to share whatever you've had. So AA, you've had a rough time studying Gnosticism and Hermeticism in the university. I'm not surprised. It's a secular institution, but the faculty is very disinterested. Yeah, that often happens. I think, of course, yeah, you're better off in a secular place, but in the end, even secular places are formed by very traditional categories. So, you know, again, you can get an education in like a state university, but it's so tradition oriented that they only teach you certain things, right? And they only have certain offerings based on what is traditionally determined to be the canon of knowledge. And things like Gnosis, Hermetism, mystery cults, other esoteric movements are rejected knowledge, and therefore they don't get covered. And people think that it's not even knowledge at all. So, yeah, you've got to turn elsewhere. There are a few programs I can recommend if you're serious about the study, because there always are exceptions, but I think generally that is the case. So, Pamela, could it mean you must be born again, again, and again, reincarnated over and over? Of course it could. Yeah. I mean, that's the sort of the norm, and I think in Egyptian spirituality that even early Christian theologians of Egypt just assumed that reincarnation was a reality. And only much later was that doctrine made into a heresy. But I think for both the Hermetists and the Gospel of John, what they mean is something more like being born from above. That is, if you undergo a heavenly birth, that you won't need to be born again. And that's why actually getting the translation right is really important. Because, yes, if you're born again and again and again, then you're not really reborn. You're not really having gone through the spiritual birth, which breaks you out of cosmic entanglement and keeps spitting you down the toilet again, so that you're encased in flesh over and over again, re-socialized. And I mean, who wants to spend a lifetime as a frog? I'm being facetious, but or who wants to spend 1,000 lifetimes going through, being socialized and re-socialized, going through various kinds of lives. I mean, it's pretty intense. Rudy, thanks so much for sending out those gift memberships. I hope everyone takes advantage of that. Really appreciate that. Matthew, you've wondered if Hermeticism comes from the Jesus tradition, being that the Greek Hermetica came from 1st to 3rd century. Yeah, well, that's exactly the time when the Jesus traditions emerge as well. So we would have to imagine some kind of contact, right? If you're a good historian, you're not trying to bury that fact. You're trying to find out what those points of contact are. Let's see. Okay. Just want to get to any questions that are left over here. Jared, how do you understand the relationship between Gnosticism and demiurgy? Well, again, the second chapter of the book, Understanding Gnosis, deals with demiurgy. And I don't use the term biblical demiurgy because I think everyone's a biblical demiurgist. I use negative demiurgy to talk about an evil creator, and neutral demiurgy to talk about a creator that is just. But my overall category is deferred demiurgy, that what Gnostics are talking about is a God above God. And that's the real important point for them. Not necessarily that God is evil. I mean, you could go that route. It's not necessarily that God is just, although you could go that route. It's the idea that God is of a, whatever God is of a higher, shall we say, he's higher ontologically. God is higher ontologically than the beings or energies that created this world. So if you believe that, then you're probably a Gnostic. Einar, so you believe that you've had such esoteric experiences. You're curious if there were descriptions from the first or second centuries. Well, read Corpus Hermeticum 1, right? I mean, the whole thing is a esoteric experience. It's a dream vision. Obviously, Paul's letters, 2 Corinthians 12, he claims to go to the third heaven, gets beaten up by an angel on the way, doesn't know if he's in the body or out of the body. Heckelite literature, which is, the Jewish mysticism stuff. And really lots of, what we would call apocalyptic texts are also just seem to be descriptions of weird experiences that people may or may not have had. I mean, obviously, a lot of it is literary, and you can combine, some rhetoric in there with the actual experience. But we don't want to deny that it's an actual experience. A lot of texts seem to be written by people who think that they really have gone to heaven and seen a bunch of weird stuff. So we take that seriously. We don't discount that. Pedro, thank you for sharing. Yeah, a lot of these experiences, it's something about trauma that opens up the human consciousness to being more porous. If you're like a totally rational, cerebral person who loves math and builds bridges, who's never had to be hungry for a day in your life, chances are you might not have this esoteric experience, But if you've been sexually abused as a child, if you've been in a severe car accident or been shot, or chances are, for whatever reason, your consciousness becomes more porous. And obviously, you can artificially make your consciousness more porous to these experiences by taking psychedelics, magic mushrooms, and, name your, I mean, even, other kinds of substances. So, yeah, obviously, I'm not recommending anyone to go through trauma, but it's just a fact. It's just a fact. Okay. All right. Let me see here. So, there's a lot that you've commented here. Some of it is questions, some of it is comments. So I'm weeding through all of this. If I miss something, just let me know. Let's see, Shane, in the Gospel of Thomas, it talks about the two becoming one, the female becoming like the male. I'm wondering if this is like the sect that had the ritual of the bridal chamber, the Valentinians. Yeah, definitely could be. Where do they get the bridal chamber imagery? That could just be Valentinian, right? I mean, it's not necessarily Valentinian, but it could be Valentinian. There's a large tendency these days among scholars just to deny that Thomas is Gnostic. And I take a totally different approach. So if you've joined the Thomas course, I'm going to be arguing that Thomas is Gnostic, and why that makes sense today, why we can still do that today. Obviously, Thomas is like a grab bag, right? There's so much in it. But I think overall, if you read Thomas as a Gnostic, you get a lot more out of it. So Gary S. asked, heard Bob Price talk about some Paul-Saul confusion with the figure of Simon. Yeah, definitely go read that. I have a popular book on Simon called Simon Magus, ? I don't at all agree with Bob on his reading of the Pseudo-Clementine literature. So, but to get the context of that, go read the Simon Magus book. And I'll show you why, there are certain sources that you should trust and certain sources that are much later. I think, Jim, you're right. The bridal chamber could be just Jewish It's not that any one particular image is essentially Gnostic or not. The question is, what is the key that you use to unlock most of the sayings? And the Gospel of Thomas itself expresses a lot of hostility toward Jewish ritual and even Jewish scripture. The famous saying that Jesus's disciples say that 24 prophets have spoken about Jesus, meaning the 24 books of the Old Testament. And Jesus says, "Why do you speak of the dead when you have the living one?" So I'm a little bit skeptical of trying to explain too much by a Jewish background. Truth, love, why do you think trauma makes the psyche more porous? That's a great question. Probably one for a psychologist, actually. But I think that, generally, I'm not an expert in any of this particular stuff, but generally, people form attachments to their ego self, their cerebral cortex, the front part of the frontal cortex sort of like controls most people. And what trauma does is it detaches us, it disassociates us temporarily from a sense of I or me as this social self that's constructed here on YouTube. Like if you know the David Litwa of YouTube, you're like, oh wow, he's a cool guy. But that's not me. So I want to always remain disassociated. And what trauma does is it disassociates you from your normal social self, wherever you are at church or synagogue or at the grocery store. That's not you either. So don't get confused. Trauma can bring you out of yourself. And then once that is done, once you're disassociated, then the spirit world just rushes into that gap. And I can't fully explain it myself, but there's lots and lots and lots of experiences where that happens. Okay, well, it's time to give away the ebook here. We're coming to the end of the hour. If you have not put in your number, this is your final chance, okay? Because I'm going to flip this card and reveal what the number is, okay? If two of you got the number, I'll give you both the book. If no one got the number, then I'll give the book to whoever is closest, okay? But again, the number is between 1 and 100. So if you haven't put in a number yet, please do so now or forever hold your peace. We got everyone? Okay, excellent, excellent, excellent. All right. Well, I think we have a direct match. So the number that I chose is 77. And I believe someone chose exactly that, but you're somewhere buried in the chat here. Where are you? Who guessed 77? Blaked Potato. That's right. Excellent. Well, I will send you a free ebook. So all that I need you to do, Blaked Potato, is after this session is done, just put in some kind of contact. If you don't want to do that, just hop online and you can email me directly. I'll just put my email in the chat, and you can email me directly. But anyway, I just need some way to contact you, and then once I get that contact, I'll send you the link. So congratulations. Great name as well. And I just want to thank everyone for coming out. I know it's late for some people on the East Coast. Thank you so very much. It's excellent to have all of you and have of your have all of your insights. I know I didn't get to everyone. I apologize for that. I hope all of you took advantage of Rudy's gift of memberships. And so, you know, I will be, I do post stuff that's just for the inner circle, as it were. I hope that all those got taken up. And I'm sorry, Jason, that I didn't get to the story. I didn't get to the question where I think you probably have your tongue in your cheek here, about Nina Livesey's book, and about whether Paul existed. I actually just got her book in the mail, um, and so I'll be plowing through that in the next month or so. So I know there's been a lot of hype on the internet, as there always is. But thank you again for everyone. Again, this is your last week to sign up for Gospel of Thomas, the live course. Take advantage of live interaction. There's going to be people there sharing wisdom. There's going to be the attempt to build true scholarly understanding, and not your normal hype. And we're going to go deep. So if you love Gnosis, if you love the Gospels, then you'll love this Gnostic Gospel. And my attempt to prove to you that, yes, we can, in fact, read it as a Gnostic Gospel, and we should feel absolutely no shame about doing that. That I think is still the best of all possible readings. Although other readings are more than welcome. I think that's the point of the Gospel of Thomas, where everyone should feel free. Everyone is free to give their own interpretation. So wherever you come down, we learn from each other. I give you the insights that I've learned over the years, and hopefully, everyone can feel comfortable to give insights because you have them, right? Part of Gnosis is that everyone has that inner spark, right? So it's there. Bring it out. Hopefully, you won't need trauma to do that. But if you have had trauma, Gnosis can also be a healing experience. Thanks so much to Justin Sledge for the super chat. Really appreciate that. Again, go watch Justin's video. Dr. Sledge has given us, as usual, amazing scholarly depth with Kant. I used to say that I can't do Kant. I'm just not smart enough. But the truth is, actually, listening to Dr. Sledge has convinced me I can understand this German who is otherwise completely unable, of whom I'm completely unable to understand. Whenever I open up Kant, I'm like, what on earth are you saying? In fact, that pretty much happens whenever I read a book by a 17th century German. But thankfully, there are people, by a German anytime, between the 16th and 19th century. But thankfully, there are people like Justin Sledge who are making that material comprehensible. So thank you. Again, thanks to all for coming. If there's any way I can be helpful to any of you, please let me know. But otherwise, I will see all of you in the Gospel of Thomas course, hopefully see many of you. If you have any questions about the book, the link is on the top there. So enjoy. I hope you all, when you read the book, you have Gnostic experiences and tell me all about them. So I will say goodbye for now. Everyone take care and enjoy the evening, the day, wherever you are in the world. Be well. Bye-bye.